Thank you for attending the webinar, Water Tech Startup in a COVID-19 World, Lessons from the Trenches with Rick Bacon, CEO of Aqua Metrology Systems. I'll introduce Rick in a few moments. This webinar is part of a series born out of insights shared by business leaders during conversations about the current and dynamically shifting COVID-19 business climate. The conversations resulted in a timely white paper entitled Realism, which LINKCO recently published. This is my way of giving back and sharing relevant information I learned speaking with business leaders on a day-to-day basis as part of my ongoing executive search practice. In this case, I gained permission to anonymously share what business leaders are facing and envisioning going forward, and crafted these insights into the white paper. If you want to receive a copy of the white paper, just let me know in the Q&A box and I'll send it to you via email. In the wake of COVID-19, many of the respondents have been grappling with changing economics related to their products and services, remote workforces, new challenges of workflow and timetables, particularly now with the second wave of COVID-19, how to evaluate risk, work product, best practices to assure clients and protect employees and keep everyone safe, cybersecurity and privacy from offsite locations, how to lead remotely with loved ones sharing workspace, and unanticipated demands on normal work time, to note but a few of the insights, disruptors, and challenges discussed in the white paper. Today's webinar focuses on the water tech startup, Aqua Metrology Systems, and to paraphrase Rick, you have to be old to survive in the startup world. Aqua Metrology Systems is an example of a company that has made great strides in its stated mission to develop and commercialize online real-time analytical and remediation solutions to predict, control, and treat regulated contaminants in drinking water, processed water, and wastewater, or as Rick states in his brief PowerPoint, which I'll share in a little while, transforming the way we see and treat water. The impetus for the webinar today was learning more about how Rick and his team have grown this company and how they have successfully navigated COVID-19 related challenges. The upcoming webinar in this series is your business going to thrive, survive, or die? Perspectives from an M&A leader with Ron Ainsworth, Principal, Boosted and Company. A little housekeeping. Some of you have kindly shared your questions beforehand, and we already have a number in the queue. You may also send questions and comments in the Q&A box, and if not already covered, Rick will try to answer those during our session. I'm using a new video conference technology for me today through Zoho. I hope there won't be any glitches, but I ask you to bear with me if there's a minor one or two. Now, finally, let me introduce our speaker. Rick Bacon, CEO of Aqua Metrology Systems, is a graduate of the University of Cambridge. He has held senior international executive positions with leading companies in the energy, consumer products, technology, and consulting services sectors. He has also led and advised a number of European technology and education startups. In 2018, he was awarded a PhD in education from UC Santa Barbara, and he joined AMS in 2011 and has led its growth and development as a leading environmental technology company. Recently, Rick jointly patented an innovation in a water technology treatment that removes at a fraction of the cost of traditional technologies arsenic, lead, chrome, and many other toxic contaminants that threaten the environment and human health. He's fluent in French and Spanish and is currently based in Sunnyvale, California. And I'll just say that some of the motivators for me to ask Rick to speak, and I'm so glad that he agreed, is early in my career, I worked with both wastewater and stormwater, and so have an interest in this area. And then through my career, I've worked with solid waste and renewable related environmental technologies. But beyond that, I have a daughter that graduated from UC Davis with a degree in aquatoxicology, and she studied the hexavalent chromium that your company is helping us to solve. So those were some of the motivators for me to invite you to speak with us today, Rick. So thank you so much for taking time out of your very demanding, busy day. So just to start us off, when we spoke, you said you have to be old to survive in the startup world. Please explain.
I've never been quoted that before, but thank you very much indeed. And thank you for inviting me here. It wasn't meant to be an ageist comment. Let me be very clear from the beginning. I think what I really meant was, instead of old, experience. Yeah, the truth is that I ran my first venture when I was 33 years old. And I now know what I didn't know then. Yeah, and at that age, I didn't know half the questions to ask. And I think, over time, with experience, you get to you not only acquire technical skills. So now I can ask someone about the balance sheet, but not only the first question about the balance sheet and accruals or whatever and deferred revenues, but then the supplementary question that gets to the real answer. So it's not only those sort of technical issues, whether it's contractual, IP, marketing or whatever. It's the more, organizational skills. So it's knowing what to look for, what to be sensitive to, the signals to read in one's day-to-day interactions, whether it's with colleagues or with clients. So I guess with age, and obviously there are very successful entrepreneurs who've done it at half my age now. So I'm not saying it's the only way to do it, but I certainly feel that I've benefited from all of that acquired experience and network of contacts that have helped me on my way to where I am today.
Oh, well, thank you. And I also just want to mention that I have a few questions that were developed by some interaction with some of the members, some of the people attending today, that dig in a little bit into your actual technology. But I also just want to mention that we will be talking about your lessons learned during COVID, which I think are highly relevant for most of the people attending the webinar today. But let's get started with a few of the more industry-related questions first. So AMS has made significant and impressive strides over the past 10 years in remote monitoring and treating and recovering of a series of toxic metals and airborne contaminants. AMS developed a low-cost solution to eliminate hexavalent chromium and submitted an official response to California regarding their reevaluation of technologies and white paper stating that reliable, real-time, low-cost technology exists. Have you heard anything from California?
Well, maybe just to set it in the context, and this particular aspect of our conversation. Hexavalent chrome is the Erin Brockovich story. So for a number of years, a number of industries succeeded in contaminating the groundwater supplies of many communities, many of them quite poor, across California. And the state took the initiative to try and bring that under control up to a couple of years ago. And they were looking at some very, very, very expensive technologies that quite honestly were beyond the pockets the affordability and didn't meet the affordability criteria of many, many Californians. And we weren't particularly happy about that. And so for the past couple of years, we took it upon ourselves to invent a new way of dealing with this pretty nasty contaminant. And the state is now re-examining and as to whether it should bring back tighter controls. And one of the criteria for that is the cost. You can have wonderful water, but if it's prohibitively expensive, then the regulation doesn't serve a purpose. And so our submission to the state was to demonstrate that the costs of what we're talking about are about a tenth of what those traditional systems would be. And actually, they're one of the big opponents to the whole regulation, quite interestingly, was the California Food Process Manufacturers Association, because it would drive up the costs of food and in their arguments drive away the industry from California. It's a very big part of the Californian industry, right? Economy. And so we're hoping that they will now embrace this, recognizing that many of their workers drink the water that contains hexavalent chrome. Their problem can be solved. And at the same time, the manufacturers will be enjoying safer water, which will end up in our produce in one shape, form, or the other. So we're waiting to hear back. Rumours are that there will be a new regulation, and we will be well placed to service that critical need, which is not only chrome, but it's arsenic and a range of other nasty contaminants that are very prevalent in California's water and shouldn't be there.
Let me share my screen because I believe you prepared a slide on this. So let me try to do that. If this doesn't work, we will continue, but hopefully it works. Can you see that slide?
Yeah. If you go forward a slide, or go forward to the next slide, and then we'll come back to this one.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is essentially a summary of what I've said, but we evaluated, so 67 wells is a small proportion of the number of wells in California that are affected by this chrome contamination. And the evaluation that was presented at the time was the cost of just treating that small fraction was going to be in excess of $500 million, with annual costs of $51 million. So a huge bill. And you're talking about substantial costs per household that would be in cities impacted by this. So it's not hard to see why there was a lot of opposition. And we've actually trialed our technology in two relatively underserved communities in California, Los Baños and Hidden Valley Lake. And so we've got real data. And as I said, we can do it for somewhere between an eighth and a ninth of the cost of those traditional systems. And the operating costs, you can see the difference there as well, substantially below. So we're hoping, based on that and its proven technology, that when the government gets round to, state gets round to bringing back in this regulation, which is long overdue, we'll be able to make this available to Californian water consumers who desperately need this treatment.
Have other states contacted you regarding this technology?
This technology is very peculiar to California because California is where a lot of this hexavalent chrome contamination took place. But there are other states, Oklahoma, Texas, are other places. It was largely related to chrome plating, electroplating, which is generally related to aerospace and defense, which is obviously big industry in California traditionally. Right. But the same technology can be applied for arsenic and a range of and lead that everyone has in their pipe. Not everyone, but too many people have in their pipes. So it's a very broad applications in terms of what it can do to improve the safety of drinking water for multiple consumer groups.
So that's a good segue, and I don't know if you want me to change the slides yet, but my next question is, What are the challenges of developing a dual trace metal analyzer? And for the non-industry attendees, why is that such an important breakthrough?
Okay, so if you flip back a slide, and I'll try and answer that. What we've just been talking about is treatment, and this is about monitoring. So the way to think about this is if you wanted to know what the quality of water was in your house, you take a sample and you take it to a laboratory, and some 2 weeks later you'd find out what was in the water in your house, right? Well, that's very slow. So if you're a water treatment plant or a large industrial company, that's not really useful to you, because you've got to make sure you're not poisoning consumers or killing the fish in the river. So we developed, and this is several years ago, some online technology which automatically measures continuously, 24/7, what's going on in your water. And this is an example of why it matters, because it's all very nice having this nice technology coming out of Silicon Valley, but what purpose does it serve? And this shows what happens when the treatment system fails. The yellow dots is the level of arsenic, which is sort of chugging along there at somewhere below 5 ppb. Just to give you an idea, that's the concentration you get if you put a teaspoonful of arsenic in an oil tanker full of water. That's what we're measuring in terms of the presence. And that's chugging along very nicely, and then something fails unpredictably, and the number shoots up to 30, which is dangerous, well above the regulatory limit. And that's detected thanks to the monitor sending out an alarm, and something happens to bring it back into sort of where it should be. But then that backup system fails and the numbers go off the chart again. Now, if that technology didn't exist, they would have continued pushing water out to their consumers at 30 ppb, which is 3 times the level that the government regulates to. So, and you would never have caught that with a laboratory, because by the time you got the results back from the laboratory, consumers would have been drinking bad water for 2 weeks. And so that's the advantage of this real-time data. It's either protecting the consumer from this, or it's protecting the environment, which ends up, as I say, in dead fish in the river because the treatment system failed and no one knew about it.
Thank you for that answer. And as a follow-up, what is AMS doing to respond to the silt and water quality issues connected to our aging and failing dams?
Well, we can do a lot of things, but that's one thing we can't do. But to bridge to another answer, I think the real issue is the problem of US aging water infrastructure. And depending on which source you read online, estimates of $1 trillion need to be spent in order to bring US water. That's not only the dams, but removing lead pipes, getting rid of chrome, getting rid of arsenic, getting rid of PFOS and all the other things that we hear about every day, getting them out of the water and making water safe. So it's a ridiculously unimaginable large number. And what we are doing, and why is that number sort of meaningless? Because it discounts what technology can do. And the reason I put these slides in that order was that to this question is that we can see how technology can actually massively reduce those sort of costs. So I'm not an expert on dams and silting of dams, but I'm pretty sure that there is someone out there, if that's a problem, inventing a solution to it, which will bring down the costs and make it more doable. Because clearly, aging infrastructure, and particularly dams, we've seen the risks that poses to communities in California when they are not looked after properly and they're past their shelf life.
So, given what you're doing, and you've certainly made strides in the water treatment industry, what's on the horizon for your company?
So, and I preface this by saying it's not a political answer. we've been very, when I took over the company, it was sort of somewhat embarked on a sort of a mission, as many startups want to do, which is putting flags everywhere around the world. And I guess being old, I realized that, and experience, that was not necessarily the best way to go about things. So we took a view that we were going to build a walled garden in the USA and build a very strong market position here, which is what we've done. We've built out into Europe similarly. But now we realize that the way the world is going, we as a company have to really take Asia seriously. We have no presence there, although we serve companies that in the US that have presence out in India, China, Thailand, and beyond, Australia. And so we have to diversify internationally. Our technology works very well here, has been approved by the EPA, people like, well, not approved, but is adopted by lots of users here in the US. We need to spread our wings. There is a risk to being overly exposed to the US. And you can see in this current COVID environment, places in Asia are certainly faring better. And if you listen to fund managers who are talking about spread of portfolio, they're talking about a rebalancing and making sure that they have adequate presence for their risk profile in Asia, and so we've got to follow that same direction, I think.
And I think that probably segues well into my next several questions. So you're leading a clean tech, water tech, quality testing and treatment company. How has that changed during COVID-19 for you? And do you need to change slides also? Sorry.
Yeah. So let's go to why don't you go to the next slide?
Okay.
So I think it's the next slide anyway. Not
Maybe.
control. I'm out of control. I don't like not being in control. There we go.
I know. I apologize.
That's okay. So the way I look at COVID overall was that it's a huge risk to our business, and I think one of the things about leadership is fully understanding risk and how you can't eliminate risk, but you can manage it. It's sort of what our data and our systems do, right? We're reducing risk, and our business COVID has exposed everyone's business, everyone's lifestyle to a different set of risks. Occasionally opportunities, but we'll stay with the risks. And I came back from Europe at the end of February, and it was clear to me that COVID-19 represented a very serious risk. And so first week of March, I sat down with my colleagues and we basically dissected our business. And these are the sort of ways we thought about it. Where are the bits of our business and what risks attached to them that could be disrupted, and how can we mitigate risk? We weren't going to eliminate risk, but how can we mitigate it? So, we've got employees in California, New Jersey, and who work remotely from home anyway. Clients who we have to service on an ongoing basis. We've got vendors, both in the US and in Europe. We have investors who we have to keep happy all of the time, and even that's not enough. And we have contractors who work for us, both in the US and Europe. So, a broad bunch of stakeholders, and all of them risks attached to them. And so we took each of those groups and looked at what risks they were exposed to, or our relationship with them, and what we could do, what we could put in place to mitigate those risks. And in the space of a week, we've worked through that. A lot of hard work by my colleagues, and I have to give them credit for it, because not all of them believed that this was going to happen. They certainly do now, but at the time it was quite difficult to get everyone to take this seriously. And then we worked through a series of action programs, and I think the next slide sort of gives you some granularity on all of that. It's maybe a bit small for everyone's eyesight, but basically we broke it down, and then we assigned roles and responsibilities as to who was going to do what. And there was another level of risk to this, obviously. So we're a small company, 20 headcount. we lose one person, the person doing payroll, for example, we wouldn't get paid, and that's not a good thing. So we then had backups and backups to the backups, and each of those people then had to be cross-trained in stuff that they wouldn't have normally been expected to do, just to ensure that we could carry on in business, because we defined ourselves, were defined subsequently as an essential business. We basically keep water treatment plants running, and you've seen the consequences if we're not working. Someone's arsenic, chrome, lead, whatever is going to get out of line. So we had a responsibility to our clients, but the first thing that we really focused on was health and safety of our employees and making sure that they were safe, and that we were organised to go virtually, but to protect the health of our employees, some of whom would have to continue to come into work, not necessarily, and others who would be remote, and ensuring that everyone had PPE very early on, and they had PPE in their families so that they were protected as well when they were sort of away from work and working remotely. And I think the 13th, I think it's the day, we went virtual on the 13th of March. And I haven't been into the office since then. And so how many weeks, months is that? But we are still, we're managing extremely well thanks to the diligence and hard work of my colleagues. But it's changed it's changed the way we approach things. It's emphasised the value of what we do, because now people don't have to go and grab samples; it's all done automatically for them. So perversely, the value of what we do has been recognised, but keeping it going has been very, very, very challenging, and I'm sure it has been for many others too.
So, and that is a perfect segue. Shall I stay on this slide, or shall I?
I think you can probably. I can't remember what the next slide is, so maybe go to the next slide.
Let me make that a little smaller so it will.
Yeah. So this went out. There we are, March 13th. This went out to all of our clients, and there was something here that. So I'm health and safety of my employees has always been sort of in my DNA, and but it wasn't only the safety of our employees when they came to work. It was the safety of their safety when they were out having to visit clients, and what they might be exposed to as much as what they might be exposing our clients to. So we wrote to all of our clients very early on, laying out what we plan to do, but also recognizing that in order to maintain service and support them so that their monitors were doing their job, we were going to have to change the way we work with them. They were going to have to hold more inventory of spare parts. They were going to have to do some of the fixing themselves, some of the stuff that we would have otherwise done, via video connections and other things, telephone, in order to ensure that we pride ourselves on 99% availability of our data. You can't use COVID as an excuse for not providing that when it's mission critical and it's an essential business. So, that culture of service sort of drove through everything, and this is a version of what clients have received. And since then, they've received other communications as things have relaxed, but we haven't, in terms of what we expect of our staff, what we undertake, but also what we expect of our clients, because we don't want our people turning up on site and being confronted by people who aren't wearing PPE, for example, which has happened. And that makes life a bit awkward.
I can imagine. So you've touched about this. Are there any? But let me just continue with this topic. Are there other lessons learned, insights that you can share with us, derived from this time of COVID-19?
Well, I think preparation, definitely. We prepared very heavily for this. I think some of what we have been able to do is because it was already in our culture. So, you've probably heard coming through, I worry constantly about risk. And this is another risk, and how we mitigate it. We worry about health and safety, not just because of COVID, because I worry about if there are bare cables or stuff that's stacked badly that's going to fall on someone. That's in our culture. So it's not that we've reinforced, maybe rather than changed substantially, I would say, our approach to COVID. I think that our employees are probably much more engaged in health and safety than they ever were, at home and with us. Managing those stakeholders, we've probably never had such intense communication with our stakeholders as before, and which has been necessary. But it's also, I guess, one of the changes is that we've gained time. I spent most of my, large chunk of my time traveling around, flying to Europe, flying around the States. And it's actually given me, I'm commuting to a couple of hours every day to the office. So that's given us time. We've actually, as you mentioned at the beginning, we've filed a couple of very important patents because we've had the time to reflect and be a bit more strategic than racing around with in the weeds. You have to be in the weeds, but you can't be in the weeds all the time. And this has given me a chance to get out of them.
Yeah. Okay. And that's a good segue to, have any major projects been reevaluated given the current circumstances and shifting timelines?
So the joy and the pain of the water industry, whether it's industrial or municipal, is it's very slow moving. So, quite a lot of what we're doing now is the fruit of several months and in some cases years of work. We have a very large install base, so they continue to order from us anyway. So, yes, there's been definitely some slowdown. What's been the most frustrating is we have these several innovations that we want to put out as pilots and demonstrate. And of course, getting on site is problematic. So we've had to invent different ways of demonstrating technology by, instead of going on site, asking clients to ship us samples of what they would like treated in large containers and then treating them in Sunnyvale. So we've become lean entrepreneurs by force of, and actually it turns out to be a jolly good way of doing it. It's much less expensive to bring the mess to us to treat than go spend time getting on site, costs and travel and everything else. So, out of necessity has been born, several different ways of doing things that we would probably not have imagined under different circumstances. So, again, I think it's been just very alert to what's going on, and then adjusting, pivoting as as conditions dictate.
Understood. So, I want to segue a little bit into your unique qualities as a leader, and ask you a bit about your family background in farming, and wondering how that's influenced your decisions as a leader.
Well, not many people know that I have a background in farming, so that's probably news for a lot of them. And it's not the ownership end of farming, it's the working end of farming, before anyone thinks that I'm a lord with land. So my parents worked on a farm. I've got 4 siblings. We grew up on a farm, and we know what the hard end of farming is like. It may look very nice in films, but it's actually very, very hard work. And my parents weren't particularly well off, but we were fed and clothed, and we got to school. And in fact, I've got 4 siblings, all of whom have their own business. So I guess there was something in our common background that that had some shape of influencing. I think when I think back, there's things that sort of got carried forward. Firstly, farming is a community enterprise. It's a team enterprise. You don't milk cows or shear sheep or harvest as a solitary exercise. And you inevitably work as a team. And I grew up, it's all my summer holidays all the way through till I was 17. I worked on a farm when I wasn't at school. And so that brings a way of working that you just carry forward the rest of your life. You don't expect to do a task on your own. And, so working as part of a team. I think the other thing that it drives is inventiveness. I mean, I can tell you what it's like when a tractor you're working on at the other end of 20 miles from home breaks down on a winter's evening, and you've got to get home because otherwise you're going to miss your dinner. And how you learn to fix stuff like that with what's to hand. And I know others who've had the similar background where it's not survival, but inventiveness sort of gets inculcated into you at a very early stage, and finding different ways. You find a problem, find a way around it. It also teaches. I mean, if anyone comes from a farming community, you know that it's a 7-day-a-week job. It doesn't stop. Weekends are just for doing some more of what you did the other 5 days of the week. So I think it also gives you a work ethic that goes with all of that. And then on the other side, I knew very well that I didn't, and health and safety. So back to that old chestnut. I've seen and heard of terrible farming accidents which were caused by the most stupid of things that could have been totally avoided. People who take guards off, people who don't put guards on, people who, and some horrible injuries. So when you've seen it up close, and I not putting a guard on, you become very sensitized to that part of working environment. And my family worked for a landowner, but he was, and so you get exposed to, we're working very hard for, next to nothing, and there's the landowner in his very large stately home. And so you get a very strong sense of where capital and labor sort of hand off from one to the other. This gentleman he was a gentleman. He was sort of benign capitalist in the sense that he really genuinely cared for his workforce. He expected everyone to work very hard, but he looked after their health, even if there wasn't health insurance, whole things like that. And this is back in the 70s. So I think that as well carries forward that as leaders, we have real responsibility for the people that we work for. The other side of the coin is, I knew, having seen the tough lives my parents led and people around them there, that the last thing I ever wanted to do was be a farm worker. So if that wasn't a push to doing something different, I don't know what else was. My goal was to play soccer, football in my language. And fortunately, I had a mentor who told me I was better than I could do better than that. But so I wanted to get out of farming, and I wanted to get as far from it as possible. I like to look at it, but not to be in it. So I think those are a mixture of reasons and influences that came through from that. I wouldn't change them for anything, but they were definitely formative.
Right. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. When we were speaking earlier, you shared that you made a business decision regarding in-house designed components and outside manufacturing. Would you talk about that a little bit, please, and explain your thinking and how that evolved for your company?
Sure. The benefit of a long career and experience is that I had to run sales forces of hundreds of people, run large manufacturing plants in a number of different countries, and have seen the benefits of focusing on what you do well and handing over to others what you do less well. So we have a very intentional strategy that is anything that we can't do exceptionally well, we will essentially outsource. So we are very good software engineers, chemical engineers, electrical engineers, inventors of technologies, but we're not going to be mass producers of those things. We'll make the first 2 or 3 versions, and as soon as we've got it to a sort of standard state, we will find someone to make it for us much more cost effectively. And it's worth the investment because they will be much more cost effective than we will ever be, and I don't want to worry about a manufacturing plant that's either running too fast or too slow with all the wrong components in all the wrong places. And the same applies, though, to, so we outsource all our manufacturing here in the USA. But it also applies to lawyers, HR, marketing, sales in some instances, and service. And we've got to stay really true to our knitting, to use an old phrase, the stuff that we're really good at. And that's where we have to focus our resources. And then we can work with partners and channels, whether they manufacture or sell for us, to take our products to market. Because I look upon us a bit like, an easier model that people understand is the pharmaceuticals industry, right? The big guys, GSK, Pfizer, and so on, are never going to develop blockbuster drugs. It will cost them a fortune, and because it's corporate, right? Corporate space. So what they'll end up doing is buying or partnering with the latest biotech startup in Cambridge or Dallas or wherever it is, and becoming the sales channel for those bright young things or bright old things in those places. And that serves everyone's purpose. As soon as we start worrying about manufacturing our stuff, we take the eye off the ball of developing really clever stuff, which is why we're valuable and what we do.
Do you anticipate that changing as you move into those markets in Asia, or do you think you'll maintain that same model? Are there opportunities in those markets that might change that for you?
Well, going back to risk, right? You never say never. Not expect the unexpected. I mean, I know they're sort of trite terms, but you've got to be flexible. My sense is that we would be better off finding a suitable local partner in those markets, just in terms of access. We're talking to people in China, for example, who not only provide some of the raw materials that we use, but could obviously are in place to service that market, as well as same in India. So I think it's not just it's never a purely transactional arrangement. There's always something else to it, which makes it a stronger partnership than just, you buy from me and I sell to you.
Okay. Let me check our Q&A box and see if there's questions that have come up. Now's the time, if you haven't asked a question, to please go right ahead. And I think we've been pretty comprehensive. So while I'm waiting to see, so there's a question
a question about water quality standards, but I'm not sure. Do you think will hurt? I'll guess at the question slightly because it's some probably to do if it's US with the current environment hurting regulatory standards. Probably.
Yes.
We've seen a rollback of
COVID.
Of
yeah.
Yeah.
You think,
well, I think
go ahead.
I think there are 2 things going on. firstly, it'd be really nice if the current standards or even weaker standards were applied. So, there are still a couple of million American consumers and many communities that don't have access to safe drinking water within the existing standards. And I find that quite shocking. And they're all across the country. And in many cities, people talk about Flint, but Flint is like the icon, but there are hundreds of others where this is happening. So before we worry about anything else, it would be nice to see the current standards adhered to. And I'm not, I'm British, so I'm not throwing bricks in my guest's house at all, because I'd say the same about the UK. What's the point of having these standards if they aren't policed? I think the other thing to bear in mind, which is sort of gives me some consolation, is that there's a tussle which people don't realise often between the EPA and state. And the states have a high degree of discretion about standards and how they're applied. And you can see that quite clearly across the US. So it's not necessarily the case that just because there's federal relaxation that there isn't going to be strict state regulation. And that's the tussle that you all know about better than I do between federal and state reach. But so long as state can't be more relaxed than federal. But it can be much stricter, and that's the case in California, but in a number of other states as well. New Hampshire, New Jersey, they apply much stricter standards, and in many cases force them more rigorously than elsewhere.
Thank you for answering that. So let me see if something else has come up. What is you can see it as well. What is the addressable market size for your technology, and what % do you feel you will capture?
That must be from an investor, because I get that question asked both by my existing shareholders and prospective investors. And the TAM and the SAM and the PAM, total addressable market, serviceable addressable market, great questions when you're dealing with a product that already exists, like a new LED light or something like that. We know how many lights, how many homes, etc., etc. What we're doing is actually creating new markets. So there was nothing before our lab on a chip. We are the equivalent of what Google Maps was to Rand McNally maps. On a Rand McNally map, you never knew where you were, and therefore how you needed to leave that point to get to where your destination. We are the Google Maps. We tell you water treatment plant, industrials, where you are exactly. We can predict where you're probably going to go, and we can tell you where you are as you move down the path. So if I'd taken Rand McNally maps as an indicator of total addressable market, I would have, and I was working for Google Maps, I would have horrendously underestimated the size of the potential market. We are the only serious player in terms of what we do, for a bunch of different technological reasons. I will spare you all here. It is a very, very large market where anyone is treating water, effluent, anything else, they need real-time monitoring. And they will be having to meet regulations, and they need what we do to be sure they're doing it in the most cost-effective way. So, yes, I'm avoiding the question, but I think the question is almost unanswerable. All I know is we're growing very, very fast, and whatever it is, there's more of it to be had.
I hear you. Okay, so the last question is more personal, because as a leader, you're also just like everyone else managing COVID-19 externally, but also internally and within your family. So have you picked up up any or revisited any old hobbies? And how's your sourdough bread baking looking?
Well, thanks to COVID, I can't buy flour in any of my local stores, so sourdough bread is out. But actually, you touched on it in the intro. I have a PhD in education, and my PhD was focused very much on internships. And one of the things very close to my heart, given my background particularly, is how young people make the transition from formal place of education, college, whatever, into the place of work. And that's a very important transition. And there are lots of definitions of what an internship constitutes. But that transition is very important. And it's very important not only for the young person, but also the company. And so I spend a lot of time researching this area. So I don't have enough to do as a CEO. I've got to find something else to do to keep me away from making bread. But also advising startups. So there's a really exciting startup in Cambridge called Cocolabs, who are doing an incredible job of addressing the problem we have today with schools closed, of virtualizing an internship for a very large pharmaceutical company, and not just sort of sticking stuff online, which is, you know, the death of online learning, but wrapping it round with mentors, with proper classes, involving mentors, coaches, a whole research layer to understanding what works, what doesn't work. Very exciting platform where everyone can interact as if it was a classroom. And, you know, some interesting stuff like no one's ever at the back of the class. And you can see how the time being, you know, they're spending on some really cool simulations of laboratories with pipetting and putting on goggles and stuff like that, and really powerful stuff. So I've been researching this, advising on it, mentoring it, and it's a change, you know, from the day to day of what we've been talking about here. But it's really important because, as I said, going back to the whole COVID thing, you know, we've agreed internally, AMS, you know, that this is going to be with us well into next year. And that's not a political statement. That's just, I think, a statement of reality. And we need to recognize that and, you know, not pine for how it was, but recognize how things are and organize ourselves, the education of kids, internships, our business relationships, with all of that borne in mind. And yeah, so the world has been spared my bread, but I think that what Cocolabs is doing, it's a model that I'm very actively supporting, and want to see that as the next young startup that's going to go far faster than this old startup, but it's got huge prospects.
Thank you for sharing that. Rick, I want to thank you for generously sharing your time and expertise to address these critical and timely issues. And Rick has let me know that if you want to see the PowerPoint, he's going to share it, and I'll have it posted on my website. I also want to mention to you that Rick's AMS website is a great resource on water, featuring links to white papers and interviews on a range of water analytic and remediation related topics. Reach out to me, Teri at LINKCO.net, and let me know if you'd like a copy of the PowerPoint and my white paper. A recording of this webinar will be posted on my website along with a summary. LINKCO Executive Search provides elite companies with top CXOs and upper management nationwide using a proprietary step-by-step process for both clients and candidates. We're on 24/7, 365 When you need help, please call upon us. The next webinar is on August 5th at 3 p.m. entitled, Is Your Business Going to Thrive, Survive, or Die? Perspectives from an M&A Leader with Ron Ainsworth, Principal Boosted and Company, and it will shortly be posted on my website. Please reserve your seat and stay tuned for additional topics and speakers, and do let me know what topics would be of use to your business sector. The registration links can be found on my website and in the events section of my LINKCO LinkedIn page. Have a good day. Thank you so much for joining us. Again, Rick, thank you so much for speaking today and sharing your vision and a little bit about yourself and your company.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.